What does flow mean to you? Flow is a state of mind, a state in which a person becomes fully immersed in an effortless and continuous progression. To me, the ultimate goal in Jiu Jitsu is finding that perfect roll with perfect and effortless flow. I'm Professor Hayden Martz, and this is the Flow BJJ podcast. Hello and welcome to the Flow BJJ podcast. Today we have episode 9 and we have a special guest. Sandy and I are going to sit down with James-Michael Smith, Renzo Gracie first degree black belt and owner of RefugeeJitsu. How are you doing today?
I am well. Good to see. I would say good to see you guys, but I can't see you. But good to see you.
Hey, JM.
Hey, Sandy.
So basically, we've had some episodes in the past. Just kind of, I love to hear the origin story, kind of, you know, the journey to black belt, where it all started. A lot of our students are newer white belts and blue belts. So hearing the story of how someone made it to first degree black belt is something that a lot of people like to hear. So what got you started? I know you did some other martial arts first. So what got you into martial arts in general?
It was Karate Kid.
Nice.
In the theater, Karate Kid, and then Big Trouble in Little China sealed the deal. So I'm an 80s kid. So that was like right at the height of the 80s karate ninja craze was when I was at the right age to start martial arts. So I started training. Shotokan karate was my first style that I actually really trained in for a long time, competed. And then that was elementary to middle school, and then middle school to high school I did Taekwondo and some different Okinawan styles. So just bouncing around, different karate schools when Dad would move because he was a pastor. So we would move to a new place. I'd find a new karate school, and that was kind of the only sport I was good at was martial arts. And so then I did that through college on and off. I would just study everything I could find from pretty much any martial art, but a lot of Bruce Lee stuff, like read everything I could get my hands on by Bruce Lee, and just had a real fascination with martial arts in general. So did that until sometime in graduate school when I was just bored I was doing Tang Soo Do, which is really similar to Taekwondo. They're almost identical. And I was just really bored with it. I had been doing it for 20-something years, and the classes were the same thing every class. And there's just only so much kicking a pad and light tap sparring that you can do before it just gets monotonous. And so I was just looking for something new. And at the time, I was working on staff at a church down here. And a young guy came and visited the church, and my senior pastor said, hey, this new young guy, because I was over like the young adult ministries, 20s and 30s. He said, hey, this new guy visited the church. He just opened up a martial arts school in the neighborhood. Take him out to lunch, get to know him, invite him, welcome him to the community. So that was when I met my instructor, Derek Richardson, or TC, which is short for Thundercat. That's his jiu-jitsu nickname.
Nice.
What a great jiu-jitsu nickname, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, especially if you train under Renzo, because the logo looks almost identical.
Exactly.
Nice.
So I met TC and I had lunch, and he took me by the academy. He's like, hey, check this place out. And, I just opened it up. He'd moved back home after college and then moved to New York to train at Renzo's, and then came back home basically to start this martial arts school. So it was in a little warehouse area, not a warehouse, but like kind of one of those office-y warehouses, like a little nondescript office, not a strip mall, but like just an office park.
Yep.
So I was tucked away and walked in, and it was I grilled him. We laughed because I asked him like probably 2 hours worth of questions because I'd done so many martial arts.
Did he train in any striking arts prior to jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, his background was very similar to mine. He's a few years younger than me, but his background was similar to mine. Grew up, all things ninja and karate and, all that stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. And so he had done taekwondo and I think hapkido and judo, and then eventually found jiu-jitsu, I think, while he was in college. So he had a head start on me in grappling, especially with his judo background. I had never done any grappling. I was when you hear people say, yeah, I trained this martial art and we did a little ground stuff, like that's about what I had,
That's usually amounts to absolutely zero.
So when he opened his school, what was his ranking?
He at the time was so he had gotten his purple belt from Renzo's and then had moved back to North Carolina, and he had gotten started training back here and had gotten a brown belt, but he really wanted like to be a Renzo all the way through guy. So he actually asked Renzo, he said, listen, I want to keep training when I can, fly up there to New York, train, but I want to be ranked under you. So for the first few years of the school, he would, fly up to Renzo's, put on his purple belt, train there, and eventually earned his black belt under Renzo, but doing it while running the school down here.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
He was a brown belt by some standards, but a purple belt by Renzo standards.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So backing up real quick, a question that came to mind as you were moving around looking for karate schools as you were in middle school and high school, how did you go about finding them at the time? Because
no internet at the time, so it was a phone book or Black Belt magazine. They have listings of directories, but we lived in smaller towns, so there was never anything near me. So it would just be like driving by somewhere and seeing it and going in and trying a class.
Were your parents really committed to keeping you in martial arts, or was it you dragging them along for the ride?
No, they saw that was one of the things that I was really committed to and really good at. And so they were very good about, even when we moved, I grew up in Savannah. So even when we moved to Macon, Georgia, which is in the middle of the state, my dad would drive me back to Savannah, like a 3-hour drive, to compete at a karate tournaments, because we used to do those every month.
Nice.
Cool.
They were pretty devoted. I think that was the one regret my mom's told me is when we did move, the one thing that she was sad about is that I had to stop doing karate at my first school, which had become like a family. My instructor was, like a father figure. His son was one of my best friends, and there was like a little group of us that trained together, competed together, watched 80s karate movies together.
I know my mom is probably going to listen to this podcast, and I'd be lying if I hadn't watched The Karate Kid at least 100 times too. So I can't be completely silent while you say that was the factor for you starting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
actually, I should say my first foray was Rocky. I wanted to box when Rocky came. So my parents bought me little boxing gloves, but I quickly realized you can't box by yourself. So then we decided, okay, let's try karate. So boxing fizzled out very quickly. My friends and I would I would give one glove and I'd take the other glove, and we just
just slugfest.
So JM, I get this question a lot, and because I've never trained any other martial art besides jiu-jitsu, what would you describe the difference between jiu-jitsu and karate would be?
The way I break it down when people ask, which they inevitably do, you say jiu-jitsu and they make hand motions.
They make the hand motions.
The way I do is I say the focus of karate or traditional martial arts is to strike, to hit your opponent, to do damage through hitting, kicking, punching. You're trying to hit them. You're trying to do kinetic damage. The focus of jiu-jitsu and grappling martial arts is you're trying to control the person who's trying to hurt you, and you are free to use strikes. I'm a firm believer in strikes as part of jiu-jitsu as a whole curriculum, but the goal, especially when you move into a sport, setting, the goal is control and to render them either unconscious or unable to continue. And then I talked to them about, what tapping out is and how we train it and all that kind of stuff. But one is to control your opponent, and one is to damage your opponent. And there's some overlap, but that's how I present it to people.
Yeah.
Awesome. I will direct everybody to this podcast
No.
if I can't do it properly.
I tell them you're not. It's like I usually ask, have you seen Olympic wrestling? And they're like, yes. Okay, you're not trying to pin the person on the ground. You're trying to make the person say, I quit.
Yep.
And that's the simplest way to explain
Oh, I like that.
Yep.
Thank you.
So a lot of people who have been training for maybe 6 months or a year really like to hear what it was like training as far back as you started. So how many years have you been training altogether?
I started jiu-jitsu training. I'll just limit to jiu-jitsu. In I believe it was either late 2006 or early 2007. I can't quite remember. I get everything kind of runs together in my head. But around 2006, 2007, I had my first jiu-jitsu competition in 2007.
Nice.
So, but I think I might have been training. I think I might have started slightly before then. And I started jiu-jitsu 2 days a week, and we have a martial arts curriculum at the academy, like it's not mixed martial arts with sport, but like a blended martial arts curriculum. And I was doing that primarily, and jiu-jitsu as well. So I was kind of training two disciplines, two belt ranking systems at the same time. So it took me a lot longer in my jiu-jitsu journey because I was also focused on my black belt in our martial arts program as well.
Dividing time, yeah.
Right.
So what was the early days of training jiu-jitsu like for you?
Tap out shorts and so I started right after The Ultimate Fighter kind of blew up. That was 2005. I started shortly afterwards. Like, I really do I wanted to train jiu-jitsu or grappling for a while because I suck at it. I don't know anything about it. And then when TC moved into the neighborhood, and it's just like God was like, all right, here you go. So I started that. It was just coming on the scene. Like, you could tell people, hey, do you know MMA or UFC at the time? And most people knew what the UFC was, even if they didn't watch it.
Right.
And so you could say, okay, when they go on the ground, that's jiu-jitsu. And people would have an understanding of what you were talking about. So that was around the time that I started. I didn't roll with I didn't know a black belt until a while, like in a training session. I mean, I had met Renzo as a white belt, but I didn't actually train with a black belt until I was, I think, well into my blue belt, because there were just so few. Here in North Carolina, there were maybe, at the time, I could have probably named about 4 or 5 black belts.
Yep.
In the state. I'm sure there were a few more. Hoist had been here setting up schools and since the 90s. So there were, but in terms of my knowledge, black belts were just these mythical beasts.
It was absolutely the same way here when I first started. I mean,
it may still be.
4 or 5 that I could think of, maybe a few more that I wasn't aware of, but same idea. And people are spoiled now to have so much knowledge right at their fingertips. Was there anybody that started when you started that made it all the way through to black belt with you?
Not yet. There are people that made it. Most of the people obviously made to blue belt and then stopped, because that's just what blue belts do.
Yep.
But we had a couple that made it to purple, but then they were like one of our really good grapplers almost made it purple, but then had some health issues, had to stop. One of them did make it to purple, but then went off to college and then just life, all that kind of stuff. So they kind of trickled away. A number of them made it to black belt in our martial arts program, because that's about a 4 to 5 year curriculum. It's not a jiu-jitsu curriculum. So there were a lot that made it to black belt in that program, but I'm so far. We've got a couple of younger ones that started. They were probably like 5 or 6 at the time. Now they're late teens, getting into early 20s, and purple belts. So we'll see. But yeah, no, I'm the only original that I know. Yeah, I'm the only original student that in jiu-jitsu that made it to black belt under TC.
It's crazy how that works, isn't it?
And some of it wasn't their fault. I mean, health issues, having to move, life happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, there just weren't many of us. I mean, jiu-jitsu class most weeks would be 3, maybe 4 of us, maybe 5. So the jiu-jitsu class because jiu-jitsu wasn't the main staple of the academy. I mean, the kids program and the martial arts, and that's the main staple of the academy. So that was a much bigger, and still is a much bigger program. The jiu-jitsu was kind of more of the like grizzled, hardcore dedicated.
Oh yeah, that's especially early on where it wasn't, the places people train weren't, these big beautiful academies. It was usually some sort of warehouse, like you said.
Yeah.
Not really conducive for, an inviting place for brand new people to walk in and just start training when they don't know anything about jiu-jitsu yet.
Yeah, and I'll give TC credit. Every iteration of leadership martial arts, like where we started in the warehouse and we moved over to what was like this neighborhood library. Now it's a vape shop. And eventually he bought land and built his own academy. So the place we're in now is like he built it and owns it, and there's no rent or anything.
That's awesome.
Each iteration, though, has been they've done a fantastic job of what many jiu-jitsu schools don't do a good job of, which is creating not just a welcoming environment, like attitude-wise, but also hygiene-wise, and things being clean, and a sitting area with Wi-Fi for parents to sit and do work while their kids train, a little cafe area, all these things that people sometimes just don't even think about. TC's like, he has a book actually on how to run a martial arts school, and it's really good, and it's full of all that kind of stuff, because there are a lot of people that are black belts in jiu-jitsu and less than white belts when it comes to running a business or teaching professionally.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that Tom really tries to instill in his affiliates, is how to run the business side of things. Not to make money, but how to operate successfully and how to have
a professional
environment.
Yeah, that's huge. That's absolutely huge for growing and retaining people and making people feel safe.
Exactly. And I think that helps invite more female students. It helps invite more professional students, doctors, lawyers, things like that. Yeah. And it helps your kids' program grow too. Parents, absolutely. Because some of these kids in the kids' program are children of professional people, and they don't want to just drop off their kids just anywhere, because they're instilling a lot of trust in an instructor when they don't know anything about the art. They've never done it before,
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility for anybody teaching, especially teaching kids.
Yep.
There's an element of trust there that you and trust has to be earned. It has to be earned all the time.
Mm-hmm. And that goes for teaching anyone. You've got to definitely stay on top of your game in all areas, for sure. So yes. I know that you have some, because I've heard some of them. Give me some stories here of time with Renzo, training at the Blue Basement, or training any trips that you've made.
I like the cruise. I want to hear a little bit about the cruises you've been on.
Oh yeah. Those are two separate things. I'm happy to. There's a lot. I've blogged about some of my trips up to Renzo's, especially my first trip when I was a blue belt. And there were those trips all blurred together. In the beginning, TC would take me and our other blue belt at the time. There were only 2 of us that were blue belts, and so the 3 of us went up to Manhattan, got an apartment, Walked around the city one day, and then the next 3 days straight, we're just doing like 2 or 3 classes a day at Renzo's, which I do not recommend, actually.
That's got to be a lot.
Do 2 at most, but realize that the level of training is going to be higher than what you're used to at your academy. So pace yourself. But the first time went up, it was very deer in the headlights.
I was going to say that had to be like eye-opening as a blue belt going there for the first time.
Yeah, so this was, I was a blue belt. This was at the heyday of the UFC. So this was when UFC was like at its peak, before the Reebok deal, when it was like the best years of UFC by far, I think. So I get up there as a blue belt. Now, I have met Renzo twice at this point. Once here in Charlotte when he came to corner Roy Nelson at UFC. That's when I first met him. TC, myself, one of our students, and wives went out to dinner, and we had sushi together and just hanging out in uptown Charlotte, which was really cool. And Renzo was, if you see him in any interview, if you see him on TV, wherever you see him publicly, that is exactly what he's like in private. There is the same way. Those 2 guys are exactly like what you see when you see them on, any media. So I'd met him then, and he knew me because I do drawings. I do martial arts portraits. And I had at that point been drawing a lot of fighters and a lot of jiu-jitsu people, especially. So I would, whenever, I think I gave him or showed him a print or something. And so he saw what I'd done. I posted some of my work on online, and he had commented, I think retweeted or something, the portrait I had done of him, and where he's sitting against the wall. And it's like one of the more well-known portraits that I've done in jiu-jitsu. So he retweeted it, and I just sent a message, said, glad you like the portrait. Here's a proposition for you. When I come up there to train, how about I'll trade you this original for an RGA gi and rash guard. We'll just kind of joking around. And so he was like, my man, absolutely, come on.
Awesome.
So this was like months before we actually went up there. So when we got there, I took all my drawing stuff. I was like, well, for sure, I'm going to have him sign the original, because we wanted to auction that off and to help raise money for a cause that we were supporting at the time. So I was going to auction off the original after he signs it, and then give him all the prints that he wanted and some other drawings that I had done for him as well. So that's all in the background. I get to Renzo's, we get to John's class, Murder Monday, the John Danaher Monday afternoon class. I'm a brand new blue belt. I went and did the morning class, John's 7 a.m. class, which is really like an 8 a.m. class because he was always late. And I got tapped out probably 100 times in the round. It was no gi, so you don't even know what rank everybody is. And I'm a blue belt. I'm rolling with somebody. He taps me out 5 times with the same thing. And at the end of the row, I'm like, please tell me you're a black belt. He's like, well, I run the affiliate and such. So I'm like, okay, all right, you're an instructor. That makes sense. It was like just totally demoralizing. So that afternoon, we're working. It's John's class, and there's probably about 60 or 70 people on the mat. I mean, it's packed. The blue mats at the time, before they put the nice Fuji mats in, they were like slip and slide. It was like that vinyl covering. And it literally turned into a slip and slide as soon as you started rolling. So I'm with my partner, and there's, a huge crowd of people, and Renzo walks in. And it's a big deal when Renzo shows up, because as he's gotten older and gotten more expanding around the world, he's not in the academy as much as he used to be. So people are like, oh, Renzo's here. And some of the students up there had never met him yet at that point. And he walks through the class, and he looks over and he sees me. Now, I have only met him in person twice, and, in passing, you could say, or one dinner. But in this room of like 60 people, 20 something of them are black belts. And he sees me, and he like comes over, my man, how you doing?
That's great.
And, how you doing? Did you bring the artwork, or, mention the artwork? Or I think I mentioned something like that. And he's like, oh, yeah. See me after class. And the guy I'm partnering with, who's a student there, was just like, wait, what? How do you know Renzo? So I told him it pays to be a decent artist, even if you're a mediocre grappler, because then you're at least known for something else. So in that class, though, so that's one thing that's just mind-blowing. Renzo remembered me and walked over and like made a point to talk to me. Then the other thing is when we were walking in, getting ready for class, just in the locker room getting ready, and George St. Pierre walks in, just starts getting ready, changing. Frankie Edgar walked in, starts changing. I think in that class, Sapo Natal was there. Gunnar Nelson walks in with his guys, and then Renzo Gracie walks in.
Wow.
So that was my first class at John's.
That's
was
amazing.
UFC, Frankie Edgar, Renzo Gracie, Gunnar Nelson. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
That's
I tell
crazy.
people it's like signing up for a basketball camp and going there and like the dream team being there during warm-up.
So obviously you understand the gravity of that situation now, but did you realize it at the time? Like how?
Yes, I did because of my because of UFC and artwork that I've been doing. I was very it was back when you could really follow UFC. There weren't fights every weekend. They were like once a month.
Yep.
And so you knew all the fighters, even on the undercard. And so, yeah, I knew the people, and I was like, this is insane. It's just insane. Like, I should not be in this room.
Was Renzo still fighting then in that time frame?
That was right before he took the Matt Hughes fight in Abu Dhabi.
Gotcha.
So I think the next year was when he and Matt Hughes did Abu Dhabi. And then after that, I think he had a couple more, with Sakuraba and then his ONE FC. But yeah, that was just before his Hughes fight.
Gotcha. Okay. You're the type of person who is more of a studier and a historian, so you understood the gravity of that. But I can't say that most blue belts would realize how spoiled they were to walk into a room like that.
Especially today. It was something that was you couldn't help but realize it at the time because of just knowing the Renzo Gracie network. I mean, which you're part of, Tom and Ricardo Almeida, and I mean it all goes. We're kind of from tributaries from the same river,
right?
But yeah, it was today. People might not realize how amazing that environment was at the time.
Yeah.
So were you able to train, or did you just kind of sit there and awe and watch everybody else just go at it?
No, you have to train.
Yeah.
And the thing about, so I've been to Renzo's,
trying to focus.
Yeah, it's John's class is it's its own thing. You can't compare it to any other jiu-jitsu class, and because it is, especially that Monday afternoon, that when he was doing Murder Mondays, because you would literally have guys coming down from TriStar, you would have world champions coming, you'd have current UFC champions, and they were coming to that class, not just to learn from John, but because in that class, there are people there who work 9-to-5 jobs that could beat them.
Yeah.
And guys would come in. I mean, there are stories of certain MMA fighters who are signed with the UFC at the time coming in and just getting tooled by somebody who's not even a professional fighter.
That's awesome.
And literally walking off the mat crying because of how badly they got beat by somebody who nobody's ever heard of. And I tell people it's a whole, you don't know the killers that are in that room until you start rolling. And most of the time, the people that I met were, I mean, even for New York, the stereotype, me being a Southern boy going up to New York, everybody's loud and rude and crude. And most of the time, they were all some of the nicest people in the world. I mean, there were a few kind of, butt heads that made their way in, but most of the people that I ever met on any trip up there were just incredibly gracious.
So what's the structure, or at least at the time, what's the structure of a John Danaher class like?
So every one of John's classes I ever took, and I probably, I've probably done maybe a dozen over the years of his class. Everyone starts. John doesn't do warm-ups. He says, my students don't pay me to do calisthenics, so I expect my students to come and warm themselves up in a manner that they see fit. And so about 20 to 30 minutes after class is supposed to start, then he will walk out of the back. He would, obviously he's not there anymore, but he would walk out of the back room, and at the same volume that I'm speaking right now in a room that's, massive, he would start talking. No introduction, no nothing. It would just be John walks on the mat. Everybody realizes, oh, John just walked on the mat. Everybody kind of starts milling over there. And then he says, so here's the position. Your partner's standing over you. He's got a da-da-da-da-da. Like he just starts talking and demonstrates the move. Demonstrates it 2-3 times. Explains the key points, just like he does if you watch his DVDs. And then says, all right, with your partner, 1, 2, 3, and then goes and sits down and watches. He just sits on the side and he watches, and everybody trains it. And he watches and they train it. He watches, they train it. And then he says, all right, guys, and he gets back up and he says, now, here's what I'm seeing. Some of you are doing this. We'll do this. Do it this way. So it's very like an old school kung fu movie. The master, just sitting there watching while the students were all flailing around trying to do what he's saying. So that's the experience. Now, for those who are in part of the squad and, his competitive students, he would, like, while the others were doing one, then he would go and in a smaller group show them something, more or work with them a little bit more. But it's the opposite, complete opposite of Renzo. Like they're yin and yang, night and day, in terms of how they teach. Renzo would tell a story about any technique he's going to show. He's got a story about how it came, or how he came up with it, or how he learned it, or who taught it to him. Then he's going to show the technique. Then he's going to answer any question anybody has. Probably throw in another story, and then walk around and work with every single person to make sure they have every detail. John's the complete opposite. He will teach to the highest in the room, and the rest of you have to reach to stay afloat of the class. Yep. So 2 completely different methods, and obviously the results both are equally effective.
Right. So what do you think it is that makes John so effective? Because as you just described, that's a fairly typical way to teach a class, to teach the move 2 or 3 times, to watch everybody do it, correct mistakes, send them back to do it again. Is it just the extreme level of detail, or what do you think it is that makes him who he is?
It's not the level of detail, because he doesn't. I'm not one of John's students. I am not a direct black belt under the main academy. I'm TC black belt, and we together have trained. I got my belt at RGA with TC and Silver Fox there, but I'm not speaking as an insider. I'm speaking as a little bit, someone who's a little bit removed, but who has been up there enough times to have a feel for it. I think that what makes John so outstanding a coach, and I think he's a better coach than an instructor, but the athletes he coaches are the ones who are phenomenal. The people who are in his class are good, but there's a wide range. Mm-hmm. So not everybody who just comes to one of John's classes is going to be a star in jiu-jitsu, but the people he coaches, they probably all will be.
Yeah.
So in that and of itself, I think is part of it, is he pours into the students almost with a savant level of focus, like Rain Man level of focus. Every match. And Gordon Ryan had said this in interviews about John, that John doesn't do anything socially. He goes home and watches tape of martial arts, not grappling, but all martial arts, judo and sambo and everything. wrestling.
That's what I was about to say too. I'm at an even further distance away from it than you are, having never even sat through one of his classes. But for me, it looks like he spends all hours of the day studying, preparing for those few hours that he's training his elite students. Like the level of study in between teaching is just off the charts.
Yeah, it very much so. And it's like those football coaches who break down tape and who are so specialized, like an offensive lineman watches tape. He's not watching anything else but where the lineman's foot is in relation to his hand, in relation to the other guy's helmet, like that level of minutia.
Yep.
I feel like, and from everything I've heard and know and what I've seen, that John does that with all martial arts. And I think that's one of the main things that sets him apart is he's not a jiu-jitsu genius. He's a martial arts genius.
Right.
And can teach you something about any martial art because of, not saying he's the best at doing those. His body can barely hold up sometimes, and he was past his grappling days by the time I started training. He was getting into surgery time and teaching from the side and everything, but his mind was his biggest asset.
Yep.
And it was definitely, when he shaved his head, it was the right move because he was Professor X, team of mutants that were gonna dominate the world. So it was fitting.
I wonder if, and this just occurred to me now, I wonder if those injuries and the lack of ability to physically train himself made him sort of double down on his study and the ability to try to make someone else, the best, the greatest of all time.
Yeah, I think it has to. I think in jiu-jitsu, as we age, there's a point where you're not going to be the competitive world beater that you were, even if you ever were. There just comes a point you're not going to be the gym enforcer anymore because age catches up with you and speed and injuries and all of that kind of stuff. So people in jiu-jitsu have a choice as they get older and more seasoned. Are you going to kind of cling to your own ability to come in and dominate the room? Or are you going to turn your attention to raising up the next generation of people that are going to be better than you? And I think, he definitely, John, Renzo and has that mindset. I know Tom well enough to know he has that mindset of like, you want the next generation to take what you've done and what you've poured into them and to do it even better.
Yep.
Take it in a different direction. So I think that's what has made it so helpful. I know some people want to cling to their own competitiveness well into their later years. And I think the earlier you make the switch, the better your students are going to be as a result.
Yeah, because just like with you training jiu-jitsu and then training the other martial arts program, there's only so much time to give. And if you're trying to still be the best yourself, that's less time that you can give to your students. So
sure. Yeah.
Once you completely, realize that you have to give everything you have to your students, that's the best thing for them. They're going to get the most of you when you're no longer concerned about trying to stay at the top yourself.
Right. And that's a hard thing for instructors to do because there's a balance you have to walk. And I have to walk this. Like my body has been breaking down for the past few years. I've got injuries. I've got conditions that you're still trying to figure out what they are. I've just scheduled a surgery this morning in a couple of weeks for my hand and just all kinds of little things over the years. So for the past, since I've gotten my black belt, I've not been at my best grappling. My best grappling condition was early into my brown belt. And then physically speaking, since then, it's been a little downhill. But right now, I can teach a class twice as good as I used to be able to.
Yep.
Because what I had to realize was I'm not going to win any world championships anytime soon, and I'm fine with that. But I want to teach the best class that I possibly can, whether we're teaching basic shrimp concepts or something a little more elaborate. Like, I want the students who take my class, which I teach the Wednesday night class here, I want the ones who come and take my class to walk away every class going, I didn't know that about whatever it is.
Yep.
And now and to me, if I can do that, then that's the ship has already sailed on me ever being the fearsome, mad enforcer, that kind of guy. But it's just the beginning of being able to create and teach and pour into the next generation. So it's tricky though, because you don't, at the same time, if you're a black belt or even a hot brown belt or something, you don't want to be a pushover. You don't want students who are way less experienced than you to just be able to muscle through you or power through you or things like that. So you do have to keep your sword a little sharp, but it does get harder, and there will be more times, the older you get and the more advanced and more injuries, that you're going to have to say, okay, in this moment I can choose between my ego or another injury.
Right, exactly. I completely agree with you. I feel the same way with regards to competition versus instruction. My goal now is to be the best possible instructor for my students, to take them further than I could go, and even more so than that, to be the best coach. I like nothing more than to coach someone to a win against someone who's better than them that they had no business beating, because we're better strategically, we're better with our game plan. Everything is perfect. The preparation was perfect, and you win because of preparation. That's what I really take pride in, teaching the perfect class and then coaching.
Mm-hmm.
That's for me, and for you as well. That's what's going to keep both of us in jiu-jitsu a lot longer, because everyone's athleticism is fleeting. Unfortunately, time catches up with everybody no matter what.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
So tell me, or tell us about the day you got your black belt. That had to be, for some people, it's usually the most important day of their jiu-jitsu journey. Fill us in on that day.
It was in, I believe it was 2018, 17 or 18. I have to go back and look. But our belt promotions are never known. Like, we never know when we're getting any promotion. And so it was during our trip to Henzo's, it was Monday morning. And I knew that one of our students was probably getting his brown belt. And TC would kind of, when we have a group trip up there together, and this time there were probably like maybe 10 or 12 of us, it's special to do some promotions up there at the main academy. And so he had told us, hey guys, Monday morning, be downstairs, or be upstairs. We did it on the third floor. He said, be upstairs at whatever time, wear your gi. Now, the class after that was a no-gi class, so we knew that it was so people could get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
So, showed up, and he had gotten Fox, the Silver Fox. Carl Kravik is one of my good friends, who mentors and people over the years who I've just think is the best kept secret in jiu-jitsu. Just a phenomenal instructor. And he was there when I got my purple belt, because we did it at a seminar that he came and taught. And so it was cool. He showed up that morning. And part of it was practical, because TC was at that point, he had not gotten his second degree. So if you don't have your second degree, you can't promote to black belt. You can promote up to brown belt, and then when you get your second degree, then you can start promoting black belts. I
believe you're correct.
But it's within the Henzo Association, and so Fox was there, which we were all gathered upstairs in the MMA, like in the ring, the boxing ring, where they do MMA stuff, but there wasn't any training going on. And I was filming, and my buddy got his brown, a couple of people got not stripes, a couple of people got a belt. And then I knew the big one, I thought the big one was my friend Dave getting his brown belt. Like that was going to be the big one. And so I was filming, and, he got his brown belt. He was surprised, and we were all excited for him. And in my head, I had thought I was about 2 years away from black belt. Like in my head, like I'm probably about 2 years away, then I'll be ready. And then TC was like, there's one more we have to do. And he pulled the black belt out of his gi. And you can hear me on tape. I just go, shut your mouth. That's literally the first thing I said to him was, shut your mouth, when he pulled it out. And he was like, get on up here. And I walked up in a daze, and he tied it on me, and Fox and him both tied it together. And Black Rob was there, gave me a big hug afterwards. And it was insane, because we had to then go downstairs to John's class.
Oh, no.
And I would then be going downstairs to John's class as a black belt.
Ooh.
And so then I was just like, oh, crap. Like the bullseye is even bigger. And yeah, so it was a while. That morning was pretty surreal. I had no clue. I was thinking I was 2 years away from getting my black belt.
That's awesome.
It doesn't matter whose black belt story it is. It makes me tear up every time, because how much is put into it, especially if you've been training for a few years. It's like so very many people want to get there and can't make it.
Yeah, it was.
So congrats. I wasn't there, but congratulations.
No, I appreciate it. Well, to have it done there too was just real, because like I got to go downstairs and take a picture with my belt in the basement up against the logo. Like where all these guys that I've watched for 13 years, that's the Renzo Gracie black belt wall. You take your picture there, and then when you open your academy, you put that as your academy picture.
Yep.
So I was like, man, I can do this now. And then if there's a promotion ceremony, like I stand with the black belts now, that just feels so wrong. But it was phenomenal, and it's the only time I've ever genuinely been speechless. They were like, speech, and I speak for a living, and I had no idea what to say. I mumbled something out about thanking them and not to give up, generic black belt speech, but I literally have no idea. I was still processing, like, wait, what?
That's awesome. I think every black belt story is special because of the time that it takes to get there. It's that's really cool. And after that, I went downstairs and changed to get ready for John's class, and the only people in the locker room were me and GSP, and he was getting ready for class. But I was like, George, hey, I talked to him briefly. I'd met him years ago, but I had just drawn his card for cops as a one of my jobs, my side gigs. And so I was like, George, I just drew you, actually. Will you sign this original? And he was like, oh, you're the artist, huh? Yeah. So we're standing there in our underwear in the locker room. Snap a picture of him holding the card up.
I am the biggest fan of his. I loved him when we used to watch UFC.
He's awesome. He's so nice and so personable.
I think we even got like a workout video of his. What was
I don't remember that.
Yes, it was. I lent it to one of my friends and never got it back. It was like a VHS.
That's amazing. So you've been a black belt now for 4 years?
Going on 4 years. I think February will be 4 years.
And you got your first degree just recently, right?
It was last February.
Nice.
Yeah, back in February.
So just to transition a little bit, you have a couple different causes that you are working on, one of which we've sort of alluded to. You're an artist, and you draw MMA fighters, Jiu Jitsu fighters, Star Wars figures. I mean, there's an endless amount of things that you draw or can draw. Tell us a little bit about your artwork, and then after that, let's finish up talking about Refugee Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, sure. The artwork thing, my undergrad degree, I have 2 degrees in art. was in college, so associates and bachelors. And I years ago started drawing, focusing on portraits. I just liked doing portraits and color pencil portraits, especially. And I would draw different fighters. The first fighter, literally the first fighter I ever drew was Gina Carano, like right after her first fight with Julie Kedzie way back when. It was on the Elite XP card that Renzo fought Frank Shamrock on. But I saw a picture of her in a magazine and like, I'm going to draw this just because I'd done portraits, but I'd never done any fighters. And I was I was at that just starting training MMA. I was actually training to do an amateur MMA fight, and before I got sidelined by different injuries and things. But I drew Gina, and then I actually started drawing. I connected with Felice Herrig, who fights in the UFC now, back when she was on the show Fight Girls on Oxygen, and we actually connected on MySpace. And I had a couple of pictures of her, and she shared them, and we just actually we talked a little bit, became friends, talked on the phone, and I'd send her artwork, and she would send me fight gear, and so it was kind of cool. But she was like my muse. I always joke she was my muse because I like doing portraits. I will always choose to draw women over men because women are just more aesthetically pleasing to draw than men are. And the reason that women are all throughout art history the subjects of art more than men. But especially the martial arts aspect of it, I really enjoyed adding it. So drawing, a number of my early portraits I did were up and coming women fighters. Like I did one of Paige Van Zandt before she was in UFC, and I would contact the fighter and be like, hey, I want to do a portrait, one for my portfolio, just my own body of work, but also I'll send you prints of as many prints as you want in a digital scan. You can do what you want with it. And if you wouldn't mind, can we auction off the original? If you'll sign it or tell your fans, we auction off the original, and then half will go to a charity of your choice, and half will go to a charity that I supported called International Justice Mission, which works against human trafficking around the world. And without an exception, every fighter, the female fighters were so appreciative because at the time, it was before women were in the UFC.
Right.
And female fighters were seen as they could barely get anybody to pay attention to them or take them seriously. And so that was part of strategically one of the reasons that I would draw more female fighters is to let them know, hey, some of us out here see what you're doing, appreciate it, and gonna support you and help build you up. And so all of the female fighters I ever contacted were like, really, you want to draw? Awesome. Yeah, here's a picture you can work from, this and that, and we'd share my work. And then them sharing it, other fighters would see it. And then when I draw, some of the male fighters, they would see it, and it was hit or miss. Some would retweet it or share it on their social media. Some would, I never heard from, depending on how famous they were. But I just built up a body of work that way. And then also I focused on, I noticed jiu-jitsu academies, every academy, they have their lineage. So it started with every academy has Carlos and Elio on their wall somewhere. And I was like,
I can see ours from right here, right out the door.
Yeah. They are the basic founders of what became jiu-jitsu for the most part. And so I did a couple of portraits of them and then just decided, okay, I'm going to start drawing the different patriarchs of jiu-jitsu so that every academy I go to, whether I visited or contact somebody or meet somebody, a fighter, or anybody that trains, I can say, oh, hey, I've drawn someone in your lineage. Here's a print. Mm-hmm. And the more I did that, the more people, some people started wanting them. And then I've seen bootleg versions of my stuff. One guy, I was at my friend Paul Creighton's school in Atlanta, and he's talking to a guy in Italy. And the guy in Italy sees the portrait I drew on his wall behind him. He's like, hey, wait a minute. And he takes the phone over and puts it to his wall, and he's got a poster of my work that is totally bootleg. I have no idea where he got it. But I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So it grew from there. And then Topps Trading Card Company was looking for artists to do UFC sketch cards, hand-drawn trading cards that they insert into packs randomly as like one of one collector items. So the guy from Topps reached out to me, and I did a series for them, and then I did a couple more, and then their baseball department reached out, and then their Walking Dead and Star Wars and
That's incredible.
The different departments. You know, once you're kind of in the artist queue of artists that they've worked with, and you've turned in stuff on time and this and that, then they'll invite you to do more, and you decide if you want to do them or not. So yeah, it came from there. But I always try to use the art to fund the my ministry at the time, and then when I started my refugee program back in 2015, instead of donating to the different charities I was passionate about supporting, I started saying, okay, it's all going to go to this because we don't have any donor base.
Right.
So that's what then my artwork focus has become. Okay, you know, let me support this however I can.
So who are some of your most requested or your best selling, if you will, martial artists portraits that you've done?
People that buy prints, they want usually they want the Maeda print that I've done. Count Como, Mitsu Maeda, and then depending on which side of the family they fall on, Carlos or Elia. Those are still, I mean, because that's kind of everyone's lineage.
Gotcha.
For the most part.
So everyone needs one of those to start their lineage.
Starter pack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Robert Drysdale would disagree if you read his recent book. Caused a fun little dust up on
that was pretty controversial for sure.
But I like Robert's book. It was very informative. But yeah, there is question about lineage, obviously, but for the most part and symbolically, of course, everybody still traces their roots back to either one or both Carlos and Elio in some way.
So let's start right at the beginning. Refugee Jiu-Jitsu. How did that start? What is it? And where can people find out more about it?
I'll do the last one first. If you go to discipledojo.org/refugee. So Disciple Dojo is my organization, my 501c3. And RefugeeJitsu is just all one word together, RefugeeJitsu. It's an outreach of Disciple Dojo. So you go to discipledojo.org/refugee and tells all of our information, pictures, video, everything. How it started was back around 2014, early 2015. I was really disheartened so the Syrian refugee crisis was raging at that time. And I'm a Christian Bible teacher, and I saw the response online to people who claim to be Christians talking about refugees as like an infestation, or comparing them to like a poison bowl of Skittles. And, you know, if just one's poison, you don't take the bowl, you throw the whole bowl out. You know, just all these images that secular nationalist political people were using, and I saw Christians taking those same approaches, and it blew my mind in a bad way because you know, I tell people, like, Jesus was a Middle Eastern refugee. I mean, as a baby, he and his family had to flee their homeland, escape for their lives, go to Egypt, and only later able to come back after the threat had died down. That is the story of so many refugees. And so it just didn't make sense how Christians especially, but everybody was treating these people who were literally fleeing for their lives, looking at them with suspicion instead of welcoming. And so I wanted to do something. The year before, 2014, I had spent time in the Middle East, in Palestine, and I was walking through a refugee camp in Palestine, the Aida refugee camp, and I was just seeing, I had met with different peacemakers and people that week for a conference, and I was seeing just the need for, my desire was, I want to come to Bethlehem in the West Bank and start a jiu-jitsu camp for the kids in the refugee camps so that they can have jiu-jitsu so they can focus their energy and their anger and their frustration and their despair. They can have something to focus and to devote themselves to, and just all the good that jiu-jitsu can do in a kid's life. And so I wrote up a proposal. I was never able to get that going, just logistically and cost wise. And I would love to do that one day. That's still kind of in the back. But I realized when I got back, Charlotte is a refugee hub in one of the cities where we get a lot of refugees. They get resettled here through the federal program. And so I started reaching out to different organizations here that already work with refugee families to help them assimilate and get on their feet, and said, what can I do? I don't have money, but I can teach. Is there a need for a self-defense or anti-bullying class? Because I know a lot of refugees, immigrants in general, but especially Middle Eastern immigrants, and especially Muslim Middle Eastern immigrants, face a lot of bullying or suspicion or anti-Islamic sentiment whenever there's any attack or anything like that.
Right.
And there had just been an attack in San Bernardino where a Muslim couple had shot up a workplace. And so I knew, there's going to be backlash, there's going to be suspicion. So I reached out to the Islamic Center here in Charlotte and said, hey, I'm a Bible teacher in the area, do ministry. We need to be friends because that's what the world needs. We need to be friends and show the community that Christians and Muslims don't have to hate each other, and that we're neighbors and this and that. And they were super gracious, had me over for coffee or tea, and we talked, and it turned out one of the directors had actually been on the judo team for Kuwait back in the 80s in the Olympics. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, he came and taught a few classes for my kids. But it just started that way, very organic, going to an organization. At the time, it was called Project 658, and saying, hey, here's what I would like to do. Do you have a need for it? And the person on staff at the time was like, yes, this would be great. Let's do it. So we did our first self-defense session. We didn't have any mats. We didn't have any equipment. It was just standing self-defense, basic strikes, and wrist grabs and this kind of thing. And about a dozen kids showed up.
That's incredible.
And they said, we're going to do this again. And I was like, I'll do it if y'all will. So that Christmas, we took a break, and then we started in the new year with weekly class. And so I had to, the one story I have to tell when people ask is, I was thinking about this for how to do this. And I had done some scribbling, down some figures, and realized, okay, to get this going and to get the equipment and everything, I'm going to need about $3,000. So I started trying to do as much art project sales as I could, and was telling people, I'm selling my pieces for $100. I normally sell for $200. I'm selling for $100, and all the proceeds are going to go to this. And I was just trying everything I could. And after like a month or so, I had raised $500. And it was just very demoralizing and frustrating. And then one day I got a letter in the mail, and I opened it up, and it was from a couple in my church who I was good friends with. They didn't know anything about it, nothing. The note said, hey, we want to support your ministry, my Bible teaching and all that. Thought you could use this for the holidays, whatever, use it how you need it. And it was $3,000.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I just cried all night, and was just like, all right, this is the sign that I need.
God works in mysterious ways.
Right. It would be wrong to not do it now. So I used that money to buy the first mats that we roll out, and a couple of, some basic hand targets and kicking shields, because we do basic strikes. And we got going, and we got up to, before the pandemic, we had about 30 kids from all over the world. My first students were from Afghanistan, Muslim family from Afghanistan that I met at a Christmas dinner, which was funny. And I'm looking actually to hire, the son now has grown. He's a man now. He was 15 at the time, but I'm looking to hire him as our first part-time helper.
That's great.
So I think I've seen through some of your pictures and what you've shared, is that one of them that's come up through the ranks in jiu-jitsu a little bit. So he's.
Yeah, he was my first blue belt. I had two blue belts, and he was the first one. And, now he's at that, going to school, college, but also having to work his way through. And I was like, well, you make a good assistant instructor. You already know this curriculum. So
Awesome.
So that's why, that's why we're for fundraising. The more we can fundraise, the more regular monthly donors we have, then I can start budgeting, like hiring help, expanding the classes. Because we've had, our classes are 7-year-olds are our youngest, and like 19 and 20.
Wow.
And they're all in the same class because we just only have one class, 90 minutes a week.
So
time.
you have options for people to be able to contribute to this organization on a monthly basis. So
Yeah, on the donor page at discipledojo.org, when you click the support button, you can choose to do a one time or a monthly, and whatever amount you want. But yeah, the more monthly donors, the more stable our finances are, the more we can plan long term. I want to break into 2 classes eventually. We want to possibly get another location. Right now we're meeting at a church that's really, really gracious to let us stay there and store all our stuff. But eventually having maybe 2 locations, breaking up the classes, 7 to 12-year-olds, and then teenagers, things like that we just, I'm a one-man show right now with some good volunteers that come, but volunteer help can't always be depended on because they have lives and jobs and school and everything.
Right. And as far as equipment, gis, rash guards, is all of that provided to the families through this as well?
Yeah, our students have to earn their gis and belts. They can't buy them. So
that's
great. Until I think they're ready. And then I tell them, when I'm comfortable putting a belt around your waist, I'll give you a gi and you'll officially be a student. Until then, you're just trying out jiu-jitsu and seeing if you like it. So I make them, they have to help put out the mats every week. They have to clean. I do very much the Miyagi-Do. I pass out rags and I spray the mat, and then we all get on our hands and knees and wipe them down and then roll them back up. And so we focus on character development, leadership development, and discipline and focus and all that kind of stuff.
Incredible.
But yeah, they have to earn it. So we don't do nothing about the program is paid. I tell some of the parents that bring kids that have financial means, because not all of our families are low income, but I tell them, if you want your kid, let your kid come and train. It's all free. They're not going to pay, but you support the program. Like, here's the link, give here, and then our finance director sees and handles all that. And
awesome.
So we try to keep me as far away from anything involving money as possible for everybody.
Go to the link.
Yeah, it's just like it's not my, I don't ever want to be somebody who does what he does for money. So I just let our board handle all of that.
So you said you've been doing that. This program's been going on since 2015.
Christmas of 2015 we started.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. Any other final thoughts you have? We're just past the hour mark here. So give us the website again for both your artwork and for RefugeeJitsu, where they can learn some more, if you would.
Yeah, you can see the RefugeeJitsu website. It's discipledojo.org, and at the top you can either click on the link to find RefugeeJitsu, or you can just do discipledojo.org/refugee. And then my art, if people want to see it, I don't update the page as much as I should because RefugeeJitsu and Disciple Dojo take up probably 90% of my time now. But my art is at jmsmith.org.
jmsmith.org.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, JM, I appreciate you calling in and coming on the podcast. So we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely.
Bye, JM.
Bye. Good to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Remember, you don't need to move fast. You simply need to move forward. Life presents all of us different obstacles. It's easy to give up. However, get up, smile, and put one foot in front of the other. Everything works out. I promise you. Tom DeBlass.